We will beat the coronavirus, and we will beat it together. And therefore, I urge you, at this moment of national emergency, to stay at home, protect our NHS, and save lives. Thank you.
Take yourself back to the 23rd of March 2020. Lockdown had just begun in the UK, but just 3 days earlier, a certain first-person shooter had just released. Hard to believe it's been 5 years since the release of Doom Eternal. First revealed at QuakeCon 2018, Doom Eternal was unleashed on the world after a delay in November 2019 on the 20th of March 2020, just on the cusp of the COVID-19 lockdown in the UK. Serving as the follow-up to the esteemed Doom 2016, which I'll simply be referring to as Doom 16 throughout the video, Eternal worked to push the first-person shooter genre to heights never before imaginable. It demands the player enter this flow state. The combat so reliant on gimmicks and mechanics that the player has to remember what to use when the time is right. Otherwise, it could cost them a checkpoint. Eternal was the first game to utilise id Tech 7, which has only been used for one other game, said game being Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, released late last year. The game is visually stunning, one of the best looking games ever. id Tech 7 is a major improvement over 6, which was what Doom 16 was made in. The most noticeable improvements can be seen in the texture quality. 16 had this pretty ugly texture pop-in that was a cause of the mega textures id started using in Rage onwards. Fortunately, they scrapped this technique for this engine, and I reckon the game looks better because of it. Mick Gordon returned to score the game after the runaway success of 16's soundtrack, although this is his last Doom game as he had a major falling out with id Software and Bethesda, citing them as a toxic client. I'd say this is a shame, as even though I'm admittedly not as big a fan of his music as other fans are, he did create a unique sound for these new Doom games that I don't think properly existed anywhere else beforehand. Anyway, let's get into why people are still rigorously playing Doom Eternal 5 years later. The gameplay. Eternal is faster than Doom 2016, which is an insane thing to say, as I remember hearing people simply couldn't get into that game because they found it too fast. It's also a much more mechanically dense game in comparison. In the heat of battle, you're armed with 2 sets of grenades, a standard frag grenade and a freeze grenade that will stop demons in their tracks. The chainsaw is now a starting weapon, and all you have to do is press the assigned button and Doom Guy will just swing it, automatically locking on to the nearest enemy as though it were a glory kill. The chainsaw serves the same purpose here as in Doom 16, to restock your supply of ammunition. The key difference being that Eternal greatly limits the amount of ammo your weapons can hold in comparison to the last game, meaning you'll regularly need to hunt down a demon and saw them apart. A new addition to the modern Doom sandbox is the Flame Belch, a shoulder-mounted flamethrower that ignites nearby enemies, making them spew armor. Accompanying the double jump is the new dash feature, which helps you avoid incoming fire and jump greater distances in the increased focus on platforming. These mechanics are vital to your survival, as improper use of them will halt your progression. I'll be real honest, I don't love this approach to the gameplay. The way I choose to see it is that the developers tore the arse out of it. The sheer amount of stuff going on makes the game look like a clusterfuck, for a lack of a better description. You'll have the Flame Belch setting demons on fire, the armor shards flying towards you, demons will be flashing blue and orange, some of them will be frozen, the chainsaw sends multicolored ammunition flying all over the place, not to mention the hookshot on the super shotgun that sends you flying across the room. It isn't that I don't understand this gameplay dynamic, it's that I don't love it. When I stop playing and go back to the original games or even Doom 16, they feel like a breath of fresh air compared to Eternal's barrage of non-stop stuff. I miss the slower pace that people often forget existed in Doom. Doom 3 wasn't the first game considered terrifying when it came out. I often think about the last section of E2M3 of the original Doom, where you're in a narrow maze, the lights flickering on and off as you cautiously creep through to the exit, hoping an imp won't appear and blast you in the face with a fireball. I don't see this type of set piece being a possibility in the current direction Doom is taking. It most definitely couldn't happen in Eternal. And the chainsaw simply being a button now is a bit rubbish. All you'll really see of it is a blur. Plus, it can be quite imprecise as it'll lock onto what enemy is nearest, rather than the one you're aiming for, which can be quite frustrating. Not keen on the design of the rocket launcher in this game, possibly the ugliest weapon ever. Puts the Halo 5 RPG to shame. Returning for the first time since Doom 64 is the Unmaker, continuing the strange connection these new games have to Doom 64. Because all the Doom games are in the same timeline? I refuse that. There ain't no way you can make that make sense. And if you think you can...
No, you can't. Don't even try.
The weapon mods are significantly more useful than they were in Doom 16. They all serve a purpose, unlike the more pointless mods in 16, like the shotgun's charged burst or the chain gun's Gatling rotator. The player progression and leveling up system is largely the same, if a little more concise and less tedious, and the godforsaken rune trials are no longer present. That alone bumps my admiration for the game up a bit. One thing they've added is the ability to swap between different skins for both Doom Guy and his arsenal. I really love this feature, and it's a shame there isn't something similar in the prior game. Eternal is a lot more forgiving than I recalled. You've got several weapons that function as a get-out-of-jail-free card, insta-killing even the biggest of demons, not to mention the one-ups that I'm kinda torn on. They do save you a lot of time, making reloading a checkpoint irrelevant, but I can't claim to be a fan of the game's move to a more arcadey style. The original Doom, for its time, was quite grounded and realistic compared to games you were seeing on home consoles, so seeing all these hovering question marks and one-ups are a bit immersion breaking. Something else that continually broke my immersion was the over-reliance on platforming. The bright yellow pipes feel super inorganic compared to how Doom 2016 diegetically indicated where the player could and couldn't jump to. I think the late game is where it's at its worst. I just think it's stupid to die repeatedly performing a jumping set piece more than I did during combat in a Doom game of all things. It's ridiculous. Maybe I just suck at it, but it doesn't change how I think they lean too hard into it. The last major thing worth noting with the gameplay is the addition of a new demon, the Marauder. This guy sparked quite the controversy when the game released. Many decried him, and some used him as an opportunity to prove that you simply need to get good in order to kill him. But forget about what everybody else thinks. There's only one opinion that matters, and that's mine. So, what do I think of the Marauder? The Marauder just sucks to fight. He's perfectly manageable. The frustration often stems from the other demons surrounding him as he demands your attention. He's similar to the Archvile in Doom 2. You've got to divert all your attention towards him. I don't like that only a few weapons are truly effective against the Marauder, the ballista and heavy cannon being the most useful. It doesn't seem fair that the one-hit kill weapons like the Chainsaw Crucible or even the BFG don't work on him. The devs set out to create a foe that has all the same tricks as the player, except that's just not true, for the most part. For example, the player can't send out a stupid ghost dog after the demons, can they? The Marauder isn't enjoyable to fight, it isn't that deep, but the design is awesome though. Second to the gameplay, the most important thing in a Doom game is the story? I could not tell you what happens in Doom Eternal. There are evil bad guys that want to wipe out the human race and use their souls as energy, I think. The plot wasn't exactly engaging, despite their efforts. I simply do not care. I don't enjoy having everything explained in excruciating detail by having Optimus Prime waffle about Argent energy in my ear for 2 levels straight. Seeing the Titans in the flesh somehow has less impact than jumping through their massive skeletal remains in Doom 16. It all feels very try-hard, like they've scoured a thesaurus and had the characters recite all the big words they thought sounded cool. Like seriously, every cutscene is just like this.
You are nothing but a usurper, a false idol, an iconoclast, a dissident renegade. I am here to smite you. I will abate your fortitude to fragments of a forgotten era.
You see what I mean? Now, I know I praised Mick Gordon's music earlier, but I feel it hasn't been implemented into the game very well. There isn't a moment for you to take a proper breather and soak in the mission's environment. Music is playing non-stop and severely lessens the horror elements that are all but absent in this game. Levels like Necrovol would otherwise be a very dark and scary place in the original games, now has the same breakneck pace of every other Doom Eternal mission. I even tested my theory by turning the music off to get a better impression of Necrovol's ambience. Just listen to this. Hear what I'm talking about? Necrovol should be a dark and sinister place, and the music manages to disguise the fact. The art direction is a mixed bag. I mostly love it as much as Doom 2016, but the design of many enemies is a step down in quality, specifically the Barons of Hell, which now remind me of bionicle figures. The design of the Mancubus is an improvement over the Cyclops iteration from 16, plus I like the implementation of the Tyrant Demons, which allows them to keep the Cyber Demon in the games. In fact, I think all the enemies making a comeback from Doom 2 look thoroughly awesome. As for the levels, I'm a fan of the majority of it. The Hell on Earth stuff was very cool, the verticality reminding me a lot of Crysis 2. The Hell dimension is just as visually awesome as Doom 16, feels the most familiar to the classic games at least. Urdak was great, getting to go to heaven in Doom is a neat concept. Although, I don't know why they didn't just call it heaven. Hell gets to be hell, but heaven has to be Urdak. I don't think Urdak means anything either. I mean, I did the bare minimum amount of research when trying to figure out, so maybe I'm wrong. I don't care for the medieval fantasy stuff though. It doesn't feel like Doom to me. It's made even worse because this is the direction it is going with the Dark Ages this year. I am worried that every Doom game after Eternal will be a variation upon it. Even though Dark Ages is meant to be slower, it clearly shares most of its DNA with Eternal. The community for Eternal almost feels separate from the rest of Doom's fanbase. I hope the next Doom game after Dark Ages is Doom 3 on steroids. A slow-paced survival horror experience. Man, I hope they even take away the ability to jump. In the end, what do I think of Doom Eternal? It's a great game. A first-person shooter masterpiece. A modern classic. But do I like it more than Doom 2016? No. Eternal is factually a better game. The gameplay and mechanics are a whole lot more sturdy, but I just don't prefer it. Call it nostalgia or my blatant cynicism. Doom 16 scratches an itch that Doom Eternal just doesn't. It feels more like a Doom game. The combat isn't quite as fast and messy, and the atmosphere slightly leans into the more sci-fi horror elements that past games did. By no means is Doom 2016 a better game. I just personally love it. I think Doom 2016 was like the first game I was truly excited for. I didn't sleep the night before I got it. And Doom Eternal just sort of wasn't the same. Eternal does things differently, and those differences aren't quite for me. I still really like it though. I got the art book for crying out loud. As for the Dark Ages, that remains to be seen. I won't be getting it when it comes out. Partially because I really didn't enjoy the Ancient Gods DLC for Eternal, and I'm saving my cash for Indiana Jones and the Great Circle when that comes out on the PS5. In the future, I'd like to see Doom get back to its horror roots. I'd like to see a slower game like Doom 3. Mix in some of the inventory management from RE4 and Dead Space, and I think it could be straight fire. Regardless, rip and tear until it is done.